Hello everybody, I'm Sagarika and welcome to my channel. In this video series, I would like to contextualize some of today's most pressing issues, debates, and points of discussion. So if you enjoy geopolitics, international relations, and policy making, I'm sure that you'll find something to take away from the videos on this channel. Through the videos that I look forward to making here, I'm going to try to sift through dogma and move our discussion towards data. You will find a lot of references for this video linked in the description box below. And for the first episode in this video, I'd like to bring up the politicization of science and how the wires tend to get crossed when it comes to fact-based analysis and politics. Of course, in times of the great pandemic, there has been a lot of coverage on the politics of COVID, from the initial accusations of racism to succeeding political battles over masks and vaccines, naming different variants. The survivors have been through it all. And at the eye of the storm is the WHO, the UN body that has caused as much confusion as it has tried to provide clarity. There have been drug-specific information and misinformation, such as on ivermectin, where doctors from across the world have accused Big Pharma of discrediting a potentially suitable remedy. And considering that we're discovering that Pfizer has been paying media to foment misinformation about other vaccines, it pays to keep an open mind about the entire scenario. Then, of course, there's the matter of SARS-CoV-19 and its origin and subsequent leak. I absolutely enjoyed the coverage of Australian journalist Shari Markson on the origins of the virus. I've linked a conversation where she breaks down her findings, sources, and reasoning for all that she's discovered. Let me just bring up that video on screen so you can have a sort of short look at the video. This is from the Center for Independent Studies, where she's talking, and she has an entire book on the subject, but even this video by itself has been extremely eye-opening for me, and I'm sure that all of the viewers will enjoy going through her research on this subject. She's also written a lot of articles and in different publications, and she herself is the editor, I think, at the Independent now. So there's a lot of information there. And this is a pretty good example of why I wanted to pick today's topic. So the muddled investigations about COVID span countries and continents, and that does all the more interesting. We've also seen journals that are heralded as being the epitome of quality in scientific information. These were the journals when I was studying for my master's in biotechnology. Being published in Nature and being published in the Lancet were basically everything one could hope for. And so when these journals are actually redacting articles that were published after faulty peer reviews and even having to issue apologies for their part in the misinformation, one has to really think why politics is so involved in science today. I've linked the news about the Lancet fiasco as well. For those of you who do not remember, the Lancet published a study that proclaimed hydroxychloroquine on treatment was unsafe when treating COVID, retracting the article when they were called out by other experts in the field. As it happened, India provided a lot of stock of hydroxychloroquine into the world, but especially to the US, the bastion of all lobbies, including the one for Big Pharma. Let me just bring up the article as well, where they retracted the results. So as you can see, this is one of the articles published by The Guardian. There's a lot of the articles that cover the fiasco, and Lancet had halted global trials of hydroxychloroquine, stating that there was a fear of increased deaths. However, that was proved to be wrong. Unfortunately, the author was also of Indian origin, and it's amazing how politics can be so integral to science today. And we'll move on to the broader topic for today. COVID and its coverage is perhaps the most top of mind example of politics around science. But there's so much more that is very relevant at a global scale. Take, for example, the politics around climate change. By now, the discussion around climate change is decades old, and there are many splits within the original factions that debated the subject. For the first time ever, the Prime Minister of India has actually called out glaring inequality when it comes to acknowledging true commitment to ecological recovery programs in the developing world. In the last few years, India has gone on to award one of our highest civilian awards, the Padma Award, to people like Tulsi Gowda and Jadhav Payeng, more famous as the forest man from Majuli, to now recognize individuals who have participated in their own capacity in ecological recovery in the country and outside, actually. We'll come to that soon. India has heeded the award-winning environmental activist Sonam Wangchuk's warning about developing the ecologically sensitive Leh Ladakh area in a non-eco-friendly manner, while also adopting his solar-powered tent for their soldiers battling for the country in the heights of Siachen Glacier and Blacktop Hill. And most importantly, India has increased her green cover. As NASA's report says, and let me again pull that up for you right now. This might surprise you, but two countries that would apparently be seen as unlikely due to the political climate and the media coverage of our countries today, China and India have both led the way in greening the earth, with India adding about 28,000 hectares of forest cover annually. The activity in both countries has increased the green cover by 5% globally. The scale of that is often too large to comprehend in real terms. 5% of the global forest area has been increased by green activity in China and India. And while progress is slow, the methods and resources that the developed world have taken towards development must be left open for countries like India that have yet to catch up. To say that roads and metro stations and train stations and bus stations cannot be created because trees will be cut is extremely misguided. The government has a role to actually ensure that the trees that are being cut are actually planted somewhere else and the green cover is increased and not decreased. However, instead of solutions, we cannot have activism to stop progressive work, especially for the folks that it affects most. In this case, the poorer people who cannot afford to have personal means of transportation and will have to depend on public commute. So dogmatism cannot overtake a data-based approach, which is in the works in extremely slow and small ways, but it is definitely a step in the right direction. And yet, green politics, a vision that actually openly combines politics with what should be a clear database science, while seemingly well-meaning, will only help to push forward a minority of politicians and their agendas, instead of inclusively taking the world forward in terms of its most pressing ecological concerns, which at this time should be plastic and climate change, apart from, of course, the ongoing virus. Moreover, spokespersons for environmental activities are often those who have never participated in true activism. Take, for example, the case of Majuli's Jadhav Payeng, a man from Assam who single-handedly created 550 hectares of forest and is now helping Mexico become greener. In 2021, on his 60th birthday, the Forest Department of Assam gifted him 5,000 saplings, which he says he has been planting every single day while leading a crowd of young environmental warriors. And yet, global coverage is so soft when it has come to doers that it must be questioned if ideology surpasses action when it comes to real-world problems. And as ideology settles into dogmatic ways of thinking, politics is absolutely inevitable. Let us, for a moment, go back to COVID and vaccines. Once politics is involved in the science, it creates deep fissures in society. With the world being more and more polarized through politics and its coverage, the rise of anti-vax sentiment is almost balanced by mask politics, with a hypocritical approach to masking, with a lack of consideration for data that clearly and consistently says that outdoor events have very little likelihood in terms of spreading the virus. It seems like an event that has caused the most number of deaths globally in recent times should deserve the respect of being examined on the basis of data and science. Unfortunately, with science itself being subject to politics and financial backing by those politically involved, the lines get quite blurred. Similarly, the backing of electric vehicles by governments across the world seems like great news for environmentalists as well as for the common woman as she goes about her day with a little less exposure to toxic fumes. But beyond the low carbon emission, the stress that a large number of EVs will put on the grid in the cities they aim to function in, and how the electricity itself to power these vehicles will be generated should remain top of mind for the scientific minded. Please note that in no way am I decrying the benefits of EVs in the scenario and would most definitely look forward to less polluting means of commute. However, with politics getting involved, the coverage of EVs and all things electric will easily sway the laypersons thinking to something other than the development of very necessary means of public transport to connect the country. Unfortunately, without a holistic approach, anything to do with science will remain a political agenda at this time. And the only people that ends up hurting are you and I, the absolute end consumer of the news and the politics. On a similar strain, I will be discussing the Green Revolution and later the White Revolution and the effects they've had on Indian society at large. I also look forward to bringing in experts on various topics and have a few people already lined up for very interesting podcast sessions, so do stay tuned and offer all the feedback and suggestions in the comments below. I will try to respond to as many as possible and see you soon.